put more rewind.
Oh, yeah, I know. Are there still people?
One more, I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Yes.
Jan, is it possible for you to give us like a before and after? This is how I responded when I was living in
Darkness.
self-judgment. and here's if that's possible in a day-to-day situation.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Oh, no, it's okay. Well, of course, a lot of what I was doing then I didn't see myself doing. The people that I talk to are often very much more self-aware than I was. I see it only looking back, but I see it very clearly when I look. I was in constant resistance. I was afraid a lot of fear, Fear that I wouldn't be thought well of, fear that I would get sick or that something bad would happen to one of my kids. That they wouldn't be happy. Fear that there wouldn't be enough money, fear that we'd have a nuclear war back, that was in the 70s, I guess. I was reactive, really reactive. I got my dandruff really easily. I think of myself as being really good at language stuff, so whenever I heard somebody misuse a pronoun or something, And my children to this day, when they sit at a restaurant and look at the menu, they look for spelling errors because that's what I taught them to do when they were little, just because that was a fun thing to do. What was fun was being critical. We enjoyed the feeling of being right, being able to find somebody else's mistake. I mean, that's a trivial thing, you could say, but that's a kind of indicator of a lot of what went on for me. But mostly, I was afraid, and I had no idea I was doing this to myself. Or that it could be otherwise. I guess that's really what I mean. I was aware of suffering, but it didn't really dawn on me that what part I had to play in it. And now the other thing is I anticipated a lot. I lived in the future a lot. Often in the form of fear, but sometimes hope. Or living for the future, trying to, there was something fun coming up or something exciting, and I would try to get through the present that wasn't very fun by anticipating that. So one thing that's very different now is even though I can plan, obviously, and I keep a calendar and all that, I know things are going to happen, or it looks like they're going to happen, but my attention is on just what I'm doing right now. And I don't resist. I just don't resist anything. And I don't make myself not resist, it just doesn't happen.
You don't resist thoughts, you don't resist what you do, you don't resist what happens to you.
Right.
It just comes.
Yeah.
So when you see the spelling errors, what do you do? That's what I want to know.
I do still notice them. I do still notice them from the pattern, the long pattern. But I don't make judgments about the person who wrote the menu, or whatever. I don't feel proud of myself because I know better than they know or something. I don't know. But I don't know if this is really useful. I mean,
It's useful.
it changed. It just changed. I didn't try to make a change, it just changed. But then when I watched myself go through ordinary kinds of things, ordinary life stuff, and the old way wasn't happening, just wasn't happening over and over and over again. Things didn't upset me, things didn't scare me, and I had a child who was in a terrible lot of danger, brought on by himself during that time. And if I had a shortage of ways to notice that something really significant had changed, there it was, the phone would ring in the middle of the night from the emergency room or the police, or, whatever, familiar, terrible, terrible, terrible stuff, and I'd just be with it, and I didn't know what was gonna happen, and I noticed myself realizing I just don't know, and I'm not in control, and I was calm, and I knew that, this could end up in something terrible happening to my child. It's not like I didn't know, it's not like I'd gone stupid, but it was really noticeable in that kind of situation. I don't know. Stuff that I was aware the whole time it was going on. If this had been happening to me before, I'd be in a loony bin by now. I couldn't bear it, really couldn't bear it. So it's not like there weren't really bad things happening.
I don't really know your story, but I'm wondering, was there a trigger where your perceptions and your feelings suddenly changed due to events, or was this a gradual change that you worked toward?
The appearance is that it was abrupt, all of a sudden. The more time goes on and the more people ask me that, or I look at it, I have to think, I don't really know what happened. I don't really know. I mean, I think there must have been subtle changes leading up to it that I just wasn't noticing, but the significant thing that I noticed as a turning point was that there was a medical procedure that I went to once a year, and it had always been really fear-inducing, and this one time I said, God, I put myself through such agony with anxiety each time. And this one time I said, God, it'd be so nice if I didn't have to go through that, and I felt it just go. But now what I would say is, I think something in me must have been ready to, must have seen, unconsciously I think, that I was choosing to be afraid, and therefore I was ready to stop. But I wasn't consciously thinking that at all. If you had told me the day before that I was choosing to be afraid, it would have made me furious. But I think somewhere deep in me, I must have tasted option that I'd not experienced before. I don't know. I really truly don't know. But I do think it happens now. I think it happens gradually for some people. And some people are aware of it, gradual change. And some people, there's all kinds of stuff changing and they don't even see it. And I was more that one, I think.
How have people around you, like I'm thinking your children, they were conditioned to watch you check for spelling errors in the menu or fill in the blank, whatever. How have people around you reacted to the change in you?
Well, it's been different for different people, but my children who were, I don't know, something like 12 and 14 or something like that, they were very self-absorbed at the time, as teenagers are, so it wasn't like they immediately noticed a lot, but I think a significant thing for them, and this is when you were asking what are motives, why do we do things, a thing they certainly noticed that I stopped being reactive and so fearful, and that I stopped feeling all of their feelings, which I had before, or that I think they noticed what they would have described as a neutrality, or a, not getting in an uproar so readily. And while that can be a welcome change for anybody in our close lives, it can also be unnerving to a child who could perceive it as mom doesn't care. So the reason for doing something like laying down the law or acting angry, I've actually acted angry when I didn't in fact feel angry, is because I know it'll make an impression on a kid. And sometimes there's a point to that. Whereas before, I would act angry because I was angry, because I was afraid for my child or really disappointed in them or something. So so some of what my kids note, and now they're adults now, or at least they look like adults. Now they sort of make jokes about, well, you know how mom is, nothing bothers her, all that kind of thing. But that's, there was some really living through it that, where I had to learn new things. Whereas before my way of, the way that they could tell I loved them was that I would get afraid or emotional or angry or something. And when all this stuff didn't automatically happen anymore, I had to become more sensitive. Like I had to get it through my head how they're perceiving this, and I need to make sure that I let them know that I love them. That just because I'm not reactive, just because I'm sitting here really just taking in what they're saying without crying or fretting, doesn't mean I don't love them. In fact, if anything, I felt like I loved them more. But, I had to learn ways of expressing it that they could understand, that were authentic. And that's interesting kind of thing. In my relationships with adults, in a lot of our, especially love relationships, there's a kind of mutual exchange thing of needing one another and pushing each other's buttons, pushing and pulling kind of thing. All of that wasn't there anymore. So but it is still there for the other person, probably, who's used to feeling adored and needed and depended upon, and all of a sudden that kind of, the power drains out of that. And so there has to be new ways learned of showing love to, it's really an interesting thing. And some people's relationships don't survive, actually, because of that, because the other person misses so much or whatever's going on. It's interesting.
I was thinking about when you were talking earlier about ego and in relation to resistance. Ego has so many forms in my life that it sneaks in all these different. Well, I like to think it's sneaking, but it's there, and so there's a notion that ego should be undermined, squashed. The amusing thing is very often I see it, but only while it's happening, which is almost kind of too late. And so there it is, and so then I engage in backpedaling and ways of trying to, sounding not really, So I was thinking about resistance. So we were talking earlier about not resisting anything. So, like for example, with your writing, or in your position as a writing teacher, or as a published author, and ego, and how that can perhaps be something that might crop up, or even if it's not from you, put on you, maybe from an external source. Do we, in other words, do we practice resistance, non-resistance with ego?
Can you give me an example in the?
Yeah, I was trying to think of
one.
I was trying to think of one. I'm sure there's one in there somewhere.
You mean when you observe the ego?
Yeah, when you
acting up?
observe your own ego, perhaps you don't have this problem, but I guess I'm asking in a way for advice or guidance on this. With regard to resistance, do I not resist when ego asserts itself in some form?
Yeah, but you see it.
See it for what it is.
See it. Resisting is counter to seeing. Resisting means you don't like it, you wish it were otherwise.
Yeah.
You feel bad or, embarrassed or whatever. It makes it impossible to see. So, the great thing about not resisting is then becomes possible to really understand what's happening, how it's functioning. And then actual change becomes possible. Whereas we think resisting it the impulse to resist the ego comes of wanting to do better. And that's exactly the opposite of what it actually brings about. Because it's the ego is the one that's doing the resisting. So it's like the ego is arm wrestling itself. When there's a temptation to resist the ego, it's the same little munchkin that's doing the acting up anyway, that's trying to deny it. It's a total waste of time. And the tricky thing, of course, is to see it without feeling bad about it or feeling self-judgment, but that's when things start to really happen. When you just see it.
Does ego get involved with time? Is that like,
That's its bread and butter.
I get so stuck in like this stupid loop that says there's not enough time, and then I go into anxiety and I get really caught in it. Sometimes I just sort of like say, okay, take a deep breath, or go sit down, or like do.
It's thought. It's thought. I mean, time can't exist without thought. So the really powerful thing there to see is the power that thought has to convince you of its reality. So the thing of not having enough time is a thought. It's anticipating. It is having to do with the subsequent moments, or there's a way of quantifying them or something. And the whole thing is in the head. It's absolutely in the head. Yeah, so it's not to try to come up with other thoughts to talk yourself out of it. That's what we tend to do. It's to see that it's a thought. That's all you have to do. Then things quiet down. And often if you just see that it's a thought, don't entertain it. Just see that it's a thought. And then return or bring your attention to your body or to the immediate environment of the task that you're actually doing, and feel what you're feeling. The thought will quiet down by itself. But if you engage it on its own terms and you respond, it's like point and counterpoint. One thought with another thought to answer it. It doesn't ever stop. Was somebody over here?
We've lived the same life. Well, up to a point. I just getting a kick out of observing, observing my ego, trying to figure out what the ego is. that's the latest game, but if I could only figure it out where it is, but I had a friend sent, it was a mass mailing, an email that I received the other day, and it was a joke, it was a Polish joke. I read it, it was very funny, I laughed. And immediately after I laughed, I realized, wait, this is a Polish joke. Doesn't she know I'm Polish? I could just feel that old stuff that you were talking about just rise immediately to the surface, poised on writing back this email. Hey, don't you know? And I saw that, and I just started laughing at it, and I noticed how that was a conditioning. I had no idea that I was Polish when I was born. I didn't have any of those ideas. This is all stuff that I was conditioned with. And I see how, for me, any kind of conditioning is still very seductive. It's very, when I get into a certain exchange with friends or sharing feelings or what happened, and this is probably how I'm feeling, and I understand how to, it's dredging up stuff, and I know it's a story, and I know it's dredging up, and I feel I'm resisting being pulled into it, but it's familiar, so there's a part of me, I align with it to a degree. So oftentimes I feel like, I'm hanging on to the edge of a cliff with my fingernails not to really drop into the abyss. So I'm sitting here thinking tonight, this is just another kind of resistance, that somehow, I've convinced myself that I'm going to be aligned with that kind of thinking again, and all this work that I've done so far will be for naught. So I realize that's another fun, so it's just
Yeah. There's so much effort. You've described, hanging out with, I mean, anything that feels like trying really, really, really
There's something still.
yeah.
It's just water, if that's any, I'll take that. Thank you.
It's the green flag.
They turn off the light.
No, you can, the cord's waterproof, doesn't matter.
It's probably just almost unplugged.
It's just fine.
when you have the feeling of trying really hard, it's, we think that anything that's gonna bring about real change, or anything that's worth doing, or is going to involve determination and vigilance and actually, I mean, there is a kind of, yes, there is something to this very quiet sort of effort to be alert, but it's almost like if you feel yourself trying really, really, really hard, it's almost a guaranteed indication that it's not useful. And we don't, I mean, it doesn't make sense normally. But, this thing about how we already really do know, we already really have this, we already really are it, there's something to that, It's like when it gets quiet enough, when we give up enough, when we stop fighting, stop trying to hold ourselves up, stop having a goal that we're moving toward, a certain kind of experience we want to have, when that whole thing stops, this is, that's when we get to, oh, yes, I'm already there, I already know. And these are just words, but.
There's nothing great because of that resistance.
So is trying hard a form of resistance?
It-
I mean,
Not necessarily, I mean, it might be, but usually it means you're in your head. And, that the mind, there's something in us that thinks that the mind has the ability to figure it out. It's like, and it doesn't. It just doesn't, but something in us already knows, something in us already,
I wanted to share an experience that I had this morning, and this might kind of speak to, it feels like a thin line between like the effort, like a certain kind of effort that creates suffering. I don't know, maybe it'll help me to say it out loud, but so this morning I started to do this chanting, this mantra practice, and as often happens, I start out the mantra with a lot of resistance. Like I've already done this practice, and I have all these things I do, and I don't really have time. I don't have time for this mantra, and it's just annoying, But I've made a commitment to do it, and so I started to do it, and I could feel the resistance, and so I kept going with it, and it took a certain amount of steadiness, conviction, I'm gonna stay on this commitment. But it wasn't like a suffering, it was just I'm gonna do it. And as I was doing it, it completely shifted, and I had this just very beautiful experience of really coming into the now. And I could feel my voice got stronger, and it was like all the energy in me lined up with the mantra, and it was strong and clear, and it was very a very present feeling. And while I was chanting and having this really good feeling, I could also feel this part of me that's hard to put into words, but you did, and I could feel all the parts of me that are like efforting and that like struggling, and I wish I could think of, like you were saying it earlier, and I was like, that's it, that's exactly what I was feeling. But it was like I was witnessing it, so I was like in the alignment of this, you know, wonderful, present, strong, all my energy, and then also seeing how I create suffering, seeing all this other, and it's so frustrating to not be able to, you know, really like identify it, because when I was having it, it was beautiful. So it took, for me, I think sometimes it takes practices, like having tools, having things that I do, and it seems kind of paradoxical, you know, like, am I trying to fix myself? But there are certain things that I do to try to fix myself that actually work, you know, that actually do get me to, you know, states of freedom, states of greater clarity, greater love, you know.
I think there can be something to that. And I think it's not really necessary. And I think and I think there comes a point where, well, I shouldn't say there comes a point where, but there's something about, you may discover that a point will come when it's no longer necessary. And there's something about thinking that if you tell yourself you have to have a certain device or practice or environment in which this thing happens, then when the time comes when that's actually not true anymore, you might not notice it. And you'll sort of get stuck in that, I don't mean you, but you know, a person could. So it's good to see if it's actually working, see it and do it, of course. I'd never encourage somebody not to meditate if they actually feel peaceful in doing it. But we will sometimes think of those things as an end in themselves or something, and I don't know. It's helpful as it is to a point, and then there's a point beyond which it's not needed.
What does compassion look or feel like to you now if you are not partaking in the pain of the other, whether it's someone you know personally or you may hear about something on the other side of the world? Does that word mean anything to you?
There's an experience. It's not something I think about, but it's automatic for me to feel it, I would say that. It's not, partly because I don't really experience that I'm separate from other people. So if I'm witnessing someone else's something, it's like it's happening to me. Me is all this, and you know, it's over there is this certain thing happening. So the idea of showing kindness because it's the right thing to do, or because of wanting to show compassion, that whole thing doesn't compute to me at all. Because I don't experience any distance. If someone needs something and I'm there and I can do it, I just do it. It's like I'm doing it for myself, sort of. But as regards someone's suffering, I actually, and this is something that's I've noticed increased with time, the pain that I can feel when going there into someone else's situation in my awareness can be so great that I will choose not to go there. What I've realized is that we can choose what to do with attention. We do this all the time, choose what to do with attention. We're just mostly not aware of it while we're choosing it. So if I turn on the radio and I hear what's happening in Syria or whatever the current disaster is, I can listen, or if I pass a really terrible car accident, which I did a few months ago, I don't know. I mean, million examples where my cat kills a rodent, you know, and I'm there for it. If I allow all my awareness to go to whatever the thing is, it hurts really bad. Now, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do it, and I can turn it off just like that. You can turn off the radio, that's one thing. So, you know, then the whole question comes up, well, do we care what's going on in the world, you know? Are we in denial? This is not about that. You know, anyone whose heart is available, either because of, you know, they're wanting it to be that way or because it just naturally happens, there's no shortage of misery in the world, and that will never stop. Never, never stop. You could go right flat out of your mind if you allow your attention always to go to every possible misery happening. There's somebody dying every second of starvation. You know, what do we do with that? You know, the question is, what do you want to do with your attention? Can you be of help or not? And if you can be of help, of course you will be, but am I answering you? I
So
mean,
it's not that there's no pain.
oh no, not at all.
So, but it's different than suffering that you've been talking about that you don't have anymore.
Oh no.
You're
Yeah,
not
that's-
creating suffering for yourself with your mind, but observing the workings of the world is painful.
It's very personal. It's like, I wouldn't look at a war situation and, you know, nothing would come to me about it. You know, it's a phenomenon. But if I sort of let myself imagine somebody's actually there, you know, very quickly I can feel that. But I don't think, oh, if we hadn't done such and such meddling in there, or if that country hadn't, or that dictator hadn't, or, you know, that's all the stuff that causes suffering on top of it. But it's a very human, personal, particular, individual kind of thing that, when the pain comes. And that I can choose not to.
So that's not resistance.
No.
It's just
It's deliberate, what do I do with my attention? Just like, you know, am I washing the dishes now, or am I doing the laundry? I mean, that's you know, we can't put our attention on everything all at once, so we constantly choose where to put it, and it's not resistance. I know that it's going on.
Can I ask one other question?
Mhm.
Thank you. So what does your mind, your thoughts do when, let's say, you're on an hour's drive or you are doing the dishes? Are you just totally absorbed with doing the dishes, or are you thinking about other things sometimes? Are you planning? And what's the difference between that and a mind that just is on a spinning wheel and is doing its own thing?
Yeah, that's right. Mostly, I'm just doing what I'm doing, and I'm not thinking. But if I want to be thinking, and I can think and do the thing I'm doing at the same time, which normally I would not. I would not. That's multitasking. That's how to do a half-assed job at whatever you're doing. But occasionally, occasionally, like when I'm driving, I might choose to think about something, like what I'm going to do when I get to the place. And I know that I'm doing that. I mean, I do it deliberately, and then I stop thinking when I'm done thinking about what I need to think about.
So your mind doesn't just go all by itself.
I think maybe it does sometimes, but I know it's happening, and I allow it, or I stop, or I don't know. I don't think it typically does do that, because whatever is happening right here is usually so absorbing that I wouldn't think to think. And if I need to think, I'll stop whatever I'm doing and sit down and just think.
what do you think? What do you feel about listening to the radio? Say you're doing the dishes, say you're thinking something you don't want to think about, and so you turn on NPR, you know, or you're lying in bed and you're having trouble going to sleep because you're thinking something you don't want to think about. So you press the button and you play a book on tape. And kind of get read to sleep by this story. Is that like a useful tool, or is that some kind of cheating?
You have to answer that question for yourself. I mean, I think it can be a legitimate thing to do. But if what you're trying to shut down in the head is something that is essentially an avoided feeling, then you do well to not turn on the thing and feel.
Well, I'm thinking more not of feelings, but of thoughts.
Well, so many
you don't
thoughts
have.
come about because there's feelings behind them that are being avoided, but not necessarily. So if the mind is just like spinning, like what's coming up tomorrow,
Or
what
something
happened
you're
today.
obsessing about. You're having a feeling that you've had 1,000 times before, and you'd like to turn it off. I think it's an
There's
obsessive
nothing wrong with that.
with either one.
Yeah. If you're really going to give your attention to what you're listening to, but sometimes people turn on the radio because they can't stand to feel the pain anymore. And that's another thing. I mean, I think it's good to look at what's going on. What is the reason? What's the motive? I wouldn't say there's a cut and dry answer to that it's good or bad. I sometimes I have music by my bed, and I sometimes turn it on when I'm going to sleep at night because my daughter's up. To her, the day doesn't start until much later than, we're out of sync. And she makes noise sometimes, so I'll turn on the music so that I'm hearing the music. It's like white noise. I'm hearing that instead of hearing the crashing around that's going on the other side.
I heard you say before about multitasking and about paying attention and being in the moment with the one thing at a time. And I think I was trying to formulate the question I'm going to ask now when I asked you about your children. I have 2 children, so by definition, I have to multitask with parenting them because there's 2 of them and they have different needs. And I think about that I would like to be in the moment more with them. I would like to not be in all the noise, but I don't know how to do it any other way. Did you find when you were trying to live this way, did you not know how to do certain things because you had always done it away with all the noise and judgment and
If both of your children are in the room with you, you can't talk to them at the same time. You can't say 2 things simultaneously. I mean, that's an absurd, obvious kind of thing. But if you really, really slow it down and look at, where attention is, in a moment when you're deciding a course of action or figuring out how to intervene or actually talking to the child or doing something with the child, you're doing one or the other. It might be, really quick, like there might just be a quick little interval with one and then a quick with the other. Or you might have most focus on one child and there's kind of around the edges a little tiny bit of background awareness of the other, but you're not, you'd be surprised if you really, really look at it. You can really only do one thing at a time. Really. It's more the case than you know it is. If you kind of let yourself if you really pay attention, you'll see what I mean. Even when there's 2 children in the room and they're both, in a way, needing attention, you can only give attention to one of them at a time. I mean, I'm just saying that whatever you think the case is, it's not as severe as you think. It's not as, you're not as at the mercy of it as you think you are. there's more latitude, you know, this is true with so much of what we do. There's more actual latitude, more space than we allow ourselves to know. And if you kind of let that in, you'll see it. And you'll do better. You'll do better with whatever you do. Really. Even if you got 6 kids. I heard from a woman in Canada a while ago who woke up recently, and she really is awake, really clearly. She has twin 6-year-old boys. Imagine that. Having twin 6-year-old boys and having no attachment, no resistance, not getting stressed. Oh my God. She's absolutely present with those kids. It's just staggering. Because I didn't have that experience. All I think is, wow, wouldn't it, I mean, I was so hard on myself in my early years of mothering. And I thought sometimes, wow, how different it would have been if I had been then like I am now. Oh my God. Anyway, all the lost temper and being so hard on myself for failing. And, on and on. There she is, she's in it.
Is this a true belief, or I had this idea, and maybe it's true, that loving kindness and compassion increase when you're awake, or are more available, or, I mean, is that true?
Oh. They're just there, whereas before you tried to make them be there.
Yeah.
I mean, they might have been there before, naturally, anyway, but, they, yes, they must be there more, but I don't think about that, it just kinda happens.
It's just there.
Yeah.
So how do you respond to injustice? You know, like, I mean, you don't feel angry about it, and how do you move to work against injustice? If you don't have that feeling of indignation, so.
There's, it's kind of hard for me to answer that, but I'll just try to say a little bit of what comes to me. There's no predisposition to resist, to say it shouldn't be this way. That's one thing. So whatever is happening, I just see that it is the way it is. In no way does that mean that I can't say, and it would be better if it were otherwise in the future. But also there's something, there is kind of a preconceived or an underlying thing that is attuned to whether there's a possibility of my doing something to change it. And if there's not, I don't have any trouble seeing that and just letting it be. If it's not in my arena of influence, or say it's somebody that is unable to, somebody that I can see is in a situation that they, for whatever their reason is, they cannot see their way clear to change their own situation. I don't get conflicted at all that I should be able to move in and impose or talk them into. I have, complete, like if I see there's nothing to be done there, I don't agonize over it. But if there is something I can do, it's just that, so I will do it. I'll do something. but it's not fueled by anger and indignation and all of that. If I feel something, what I feel is pain for whoever's in a situation and is suffering. But I used to get really mad, like I used to be a sort of political activist, grassroots kind of person. And a lot of what fueled that was anger, righteous indignation, and me thinking I knew better than somebody else, and hating Ronald Reagan and Caspar Weinberger, and as if somehow something in me thought I needed to be on the right side, and if I was on the right, and whatever, none of that is there. I don't know. I think it can look like, unless we're angry or in resistance, nothing will change in the world. Because, because a lot of the, political, social justice, all the stuff is set up, it's just rampant with anger and fear. It's why we have wars, after all. When I see somebody like the guy that killed all those people in Norway, it's in the news now, and we're getting treated again to the whole thing. But when I sort of contemplate him, I just feel, this, it's sad, sad, sad. I just feel such sadness when I think about him, or when I and he's a murderer, it's not like I feel sorry for him or something. It's just, it's not like I know the man. I don't know what he feels like. I can't really enter into the mind or the heart of someone who would do that. But to me, it's like that somebody could be so out of line with, like, that he could be so unaware of the pain that he dealt so many people. The only thing I get there is sadness. I just it's heartbreaking to me. And there's so much of it. Talk about, where not to put your attention. If I just listened to the news all day long, I'd be crippled by the end of the day. Crippled. So I'm not going to do it.
Think of Gandhi, as kind of an example, somebody who was aware, but also was able to make such sweeping change.
And also Thich Nhat Hanh, he talked about, I'm sure you know his poem about talking about the, hearing about some of the boat people that were attacked by the robbers who were robbing the boats at the time of the Vietnam War, and taking everything from these people who were trying to escape, and that he all night tried to figure out, that he wrote a poem about that I am the boatman, I am the child who was raped and jumped into the sea, I'm her parents who are watching this whole process. I'm all of these people, all of them are me. He did a much better job than I just did by telling you about it, but the whole thing was the fact that given the right circumstances, there is nothing much that I can't think that I wouldn't be capable of doing, which gives me compassion for myself and compassion for that other person. And sort of a feeling of, I don't know, just of not know. I don't know. I don't know.
Under the right circumstances, we're capable of doing things we wouldn't normally imagine we could do. Cruelty. That's part of what's heartbreaking.
I was thinking about about God, about naming this place within as God. What's your thoughts about
That I don't use the word God when I'm talking, but my experience of it is that, I'm still not thinking the word God, but I can't, if I had to to me, it's nonsensical that God could be anything but that. Or that if there is a God, surely that's it, isn't it? I mean, what else would God mean by that? You know, but it's a word that's, you know, it's so wrongly used and differently used and misunderstood and who can understand it anyway? I mean, who can understand that? The whole point of the effect of it is that we're silenced, right? That's why we're still and quiet in that. So, yes, I agree with you, and it's not, I don't think about it or talk about it that way, but the animal experience of it, of course, is that is what comes to me if something comes. It's just that as soon as the mind gets hold of it, you know, we're in trouble. But that's okay as long as we see this a thought. It's just a thought, just a word.
But I had learned that even two murderers are gods.
You say that again, I didn't hear you.
I had learned that even murderers too are God. May not be what we'd like to think of it, but it is that.
It's beyond, there's that wonderful Rumi poem that I would never be able to recite, but it's something about beyond, out beyond all considerations of good and evil.
There is a field on each of there.
Thank you. It's, and this is unnerving sometimes, but the idea that the space of awareness or God or however you say it is so neutral, profoundly neutral, that everything happens in it and it doesn't care. Yes, then of course murderers are there too. But the mind thinking, oh, how could somebody who would be a murderer have God, you know, like this thing that we say, you know, we're all awake. Well, so was that in Hitler? Is that in the guy in Norway? And yeah, it's just that the mind can't grasp how could that be, and it can rest from it because it shouldn't try. It's not equipped. This isn't about good people and bad people. It's just not. Or if it is, it's about all of us, and we're all good people and all bad people. Yes.
Does evil exist?
It's a.
Some people believe that.
Yeah, I don't experience. I don't have an experience that I would say tells me that evil exists, but it, you know, it's like God. I think it's a category to put something in to make it so we know how to orient towards something. And you know, sort of to me, the question is what is that behavior or what is that sort of person or phenomenon, absent my having dropped it into a category, you know. How does it change my engagement with it if I don't call it evil? Or, you know, that's what's of interest to me. We still have to, I don't know, I think it's a distancing thing to pronounce something evil. It gives us a way to cope. And I think even when people do really terrible things, something in them thinks it's good for them. Like the guy in Norway apparently thought he was doing it. Even when we inflict pain on ourselves, somewhere in us we think it's a good thing. We do it for what is deeply felt to be a good reason. And, you know, we can see that's as screwy as it is, but it still goes on. And maybe what we call evil is like that too. I don't know. I'm mindful of the time, and it's almost 9, and I just wanna say a few announcement sorts of things. Although it's very hard for me to put this head on right now, but I'm gonna see if I can do this, because I always fail at it abysmally, and I'm trying to do better. First of all, I really wanna thank Gotcha for and all of you for getting yourselves here and not doing whatever else you would have done tonight. And I don't send out a lot of emails, but if you would like to get emails about I have a book that's coming out, or teaching things that might happen in the area that you live in, there's a piece of paper in that, is that the library? Which is the room just after you go out on the left, there's a place where, if you already know that I have your email address, please don't do it again, you don't need to, but if you're not already on it and you'd like to be, just know that I don't send out a lot of emails, you're not gonna start getting deluged, and you can always remove yourself at any time, but if you'd like to be on the list, there's a piece of paper and you could put your name in. And I also have books and CDs in there if that's of interest. And we're gonna have here on May 12th, from 10 to 4, a retreat, and if you're interested in that, you should maybe put your name on that piece of paper and just say you're interested in the May 12th, and we'll let you know more information about it. It'll be from 10 to 4, I think. This is a Saturday. May 12th is a Saturday. Is there something else I'm supposed to say? I don't think so. I have a website where I, sometimes things come to me that I think might be of use. And so I write up these essays and put them on the website. And it's janfrazierteachings.com. So if that's of interest to you, you could go there. And also I say things like, where I'm going to be having a teaching or something. So I guess that's all I need to say.
I'll say a couple of things.
Oh, yeah.
Some of you got this announcement just from me, not from Jen, people that I know. So she has, you may not know, she's doing a workshop tomorrow down the Cape in Yarmouth, West Yarmouth, for anybody who's in that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And some of you called at the last minute, so I just said bring your check or money with you tonight. So if you haven't taken care of that part of business, that would be something good to do before you leave. And the particulars on the workshop will be sent out via email, but you would be bringing your own lunch. It won't be catered. Sorry.
Yeah, if we've already been receiving communication from you about tonight, will we automatically get communication about the May 12th?
What's your name?
Roxanne Madonna.
Oh, Roxanne. Okay, so you're actually on the Jan's list.
You should email me and just, or put it on the paper that you'd like to, because it won't automatically, the answer is no, not automatically, not necessarily. Yeah, glad to hear you say a name, because I knew I remember.
What time is the workshop tomorrow?
1 to 4. It's in West Yarmouth. And you can register online if you're interested. You can go on my website and there's a place where you can click and it just happens online. Yeah. Things can be different in your life. Wherever you are, truly, really, wherever you, and I'm not talking about like a whole big full-blown awakening necessarily, but that too. But I'm just saying, wherever you are, wherever you've come to so far, realize that more can happen. I'm talking about suffering less and really living your life and feeling more at peace. Really, truly, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. how far you've come or however stuck you are, more new, different, good stuff can happen. Just be willing to see where you are and don't judge yourself and be amazed. You know, a year from now you may look back and say, wow, look at all the suffering I'm not doing anymore. Really. Yeah, that's great. So have a great time.